Good morning, everyone. Today's Monday, May 11th. This is the start of our ninth week of distance learning. I hope everybody had a great weekend. And this week is also just a little bit different with the schedule. So on our screen here, I want to start with our weekly layout. Notice that every other day, so tomorrow and Thursday, I'm giving you guys a day to just continue on working on the previous day's tasks. So you'll have really just 2 days in the next couple of days that you need to check in. Of course, today, and then not again until Wednesday. And since we are going to be finishing up the packet pages of our Unit 6 packet and doing a little bit of enduring issues practice at the end of the week, I'm not assigning you guys any review questions for these particular pages this week. Next week, when we come back from doing a little bit of enduring issues practice on Friday, that is when I'll have just a quiz, not a test, but a shorter quiz of some multiple choice questions to finish off our Unit 6 topic. Since this is a shorter unit and we're getting through it a little bit faster, there's not quite as much material to cover. It'll just be a shorter quiz, and those questions will cover the topics of this week. So the one announcement as far as assignments for this week is on Friday, I will post an Enduring Issues document practice sheet. This is the same as what we did on Unit 4 for Islam and Middle Eastern civilizations. I will give you 3 or 4 documents that you would normally see on an Enduring Issues Regents essay task. I'll have a screencast that will go over the first one with you to take you through one as an example with me. And then I'll let you guys practice the other documents in that assignment on your own. So that will be posted on Friday, and that will be your task to finish up on Friday. And then when we come back next week, we will have just a quiz of some review questions for this Unit 6. So today, we're going to be learning about Mansa Musa on page 6 of our packet. So make sure that you guys have that open and ready to go. And also on that page, which I'm not going to read through with you, is a link to a New York Times Upfront article. Upfront is a kind of like a junior teenage version of their online magazine that they have. And the title of this article is called The $400 Billion Man. And that's going to be part of your task today in order to answer the questions that are on page 6. All right, before we go on to our packet page, just one last little reminder. I don't have anything down here for assignments due today, but just as a reminder, make sure that you have completed the week 8 questions that covered the first few pages of our Unit 6 packet on trans-Saharan trade and some of the West African kingdoms and how they became prosperous. So far, I have a little over half of you guys, of all you students that have submitted that so far. So I just want to remind you to make sure that you take care of that before too long so you don't get too far behind. All right, so have your packets ready on page 6. We'll jump over and we will start going over that together. All right, so on page 6, our question topic for today is who was Mansa Musa and what were the effects of his rule and his famous journey? So just to recap, to give you a better understanding of the big picture of where we're talking about, when we're talking about, who we're talking about. So last week on page 5, we learned about 3 West African empires, Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. And we studied a little bit about what made them prosperous. Their location was a big, big factor for that, especially the capital city called Timbuktu, which was the capital of the Mali Empire. And looking at this map just as a refresher, Timbuktu, we said, was at the middle of kind of this spider web of trade routes, centrally located between all of the trade routes going in and out of Western Africa. And we'll see a little bit more about what type of things that they were trading on the next page too. But Mali, as one of the 3 of these kingdoms, is going to get the spotlight here in our packet. Even though we have identified 3, Mali is the one that has kind of the most famous capital of Timbuktu, and on the page that we're covering today, has one of the most famous leaders of all three of these empires, and the king of Mansa Musa. So let's keep going with our question. Who was Mansa Musa, and what were the effects of his rule and his famous journey? So below, to start off, I have a map of Mansa Musa's route to Mecca. But notice where Timbuktu is right here. Different type of map, but same location as what I showed you on the last page. Timbuktu, remember, was between the gold mines towards the coast of West Africa and the salt mines up in the Saharan Desert, a little bit closer to Central and Northern Africa. So, to quote the very famous and very funny comedy history movie maker Mel Brooks, one of the most important things for any civilization and any person in their life or in history is location, location, location. So, location of Timbuktu is very important, and we'll see how that impacts Mansa Musa's status as king and the legacy that he leaves behind. So there's not a whole lot to read on this page, but I do want you to take a look at this article on your own after you watch this screencast. Right now, we are going to watch the Mansa Musa TED Talk video, which is kind of like an animated, little short summary of his legacy. So let's jump over to that. And I may pause this just a few times to make some comments and help explain a few things.
If someone asked you who the richest people in history were, who would you name? Perhaps a billionaire banker or corporate mogul like Bill Gates or John D. Rockefeller. How about African King Musa Kita I? Ruling the Mali Empire in the 14th century CE, Mansa Musa, or the King of Kings, amassed a fortune that possibly made him one of the wealthiest people who ever lived. But his vast wealth was only one piece of his rich legacy. When Mansa Musa came to power in 1312, much of Europe was racked by famine and civil wars.
So just a quick note on the time period here. Remember, this is the 1300s for Mali and Mansa Musa, the early 1300s, and this falls right in the smack dab in the middle of our Middle Ages unit from last unit. So up here in Europe, notice the boot shape of Italy. This is what we were learning about last unit. All of the disorganized kingdoms, the feudal system, constant wars between kings using their knights and their armies to battle each other for territory, famine, the Black Plague, what we kind of also, what's also known, as the Dark Ages in Europe. So while these Dark Ages are happening in Europe, further down here in Africa and the Middle East, in the Islamic world, was actually a very prosperous time with many Golden Age civilizations.
But many African kingdoms and the Islamic world were flourishing, and Mansa Musa played a great role in bringing the fruits of this flourishing to his own realm. By strategically annexing the city of Timbuktu and re-establishing power over the city of Gaul, he gained control over important trade routes between the Mediterranean and the West African coast, continuing a period of expansion which dramatically increased Mali's size. The territory of the Mali Empire was rich in natural resources, such as gold and salt. The world first witnessed the extent of Mansa Musa's wealth in 1324, when he took his pilgrimage to Mecca. Not one to travel on a budget, he brought a caravan stretching as far as the eye could see. Accounts of this journey are mostly based on an oral testimony and differing written records, so it's difficult to determine the exact details. But what most agree on is the extravagant scale of the excursion. Chroniclers describe an entourage of tens of thousands of soldiers, civilians, and slaves, 500 heralds bearing gold staffs and dressed in fine silks, and many camels and horses bearing an abundance of gold bars. Stopping in cities such as Cairo, Mansa Musa is said to have spent massive quantities of gold, giving to the poor, buying souvenirs, and even having mosques built along the way. In fact, his spending may have destabilized the regional economy, causing mass inflation. This journey reportedly took over a year, and by the time Mansa Musa returned, tales of his amazing wealth had spread to the ports of the Mediterranean.
So I want to stop there just for a second. Notice that this journey is taking about an entire year for him to go from Timbuktu, way over here in Western Africa, all the way across Northern Africa, into the Middle East, down the Arabian Peninsula to where Mecca was. So again, why is this king of a West African civilization making this really long, expensive, and important journey to Mecca? Well, remember, what religion is he? He is a Mansa of the Mali kingdom, and as we've read about and as the video has told us so far, most of these kings in this area of Africa were Muslim, so they follow the Islamic religion. So he's making his trip, his pilgrimage, all the way to Mecca. And think about, what is that called? It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's one of our questions that we'll have on the rest of the page, so I just want to foreshadow that question for you now. But as he's going along, he's also bringing all of his helpers, all of his soldiers, and he's bringing along tons and tons of his wealth too. So as he goes along, he's spending this money, he's having mosques and schools built, he's giving away some of this money. What's one of the other 5 pillars of Islam where people give out, it's called almsgiving. They give out items and they help people and they give out money to people who are less fortunate than them. It's the pillar of charity or almsgiving. So he's actually completing 2 of the major pillars of Islam in one motion. While he's going on his journey, he's completing almsgiving and he is making the pilgrimage to Mecca.
Mali and its king were elevated to near legendary status, cemented by their inclusion on the 1375 Catalan Atlas. One of the most important world maps of medieval Europe, it depicted the king holding a scepter and a gleaming gold nugget. Mansa Musa had literally put his empire and himself on the map. But material riches weren't the king's only concern. As a devout Muslim, he took a particular interest in Timbuktu, already a center of religion and learning prior to its annexation. Upon returning from his pilgrimage, he had the great Jinguerbert Mosque built there with the help of an Andalusian architect. He also established a major university, further elevating the city's reputation and attracting scholars and students from all over the Islamic world.
That should remind us of one of our review questions from last week. One of the pieces of evidence that you could maybe have used for a question on page 5 about how kingdoms like Mali became prosperous and what would attract scholars to some of these capital cities like Timbuktu was the fact that they were centers of learning, of not only scholarly learning, but also religious learning too. So that university that the video here is talking about, if you look back on your page, that is the Sankore University, which still exists today. And the video that we saw on page 5 showed a caretaker of one of the libraries in that university, and how he still has all the old documents and records and books that were collected during the 1300s under the Mali kingdom in Timbuktu.
Under Mansa Musa, the empire became urbanized, with schools and mosques in hundreds of densely populated towns. The king's rich legacy persisted for generations, and to this day, there are mausoleums, libraries, and mosques that stand as a testament to this golden age of Mali's history.
And that's exactly why we're trying to understand his impact, is that he clearly had lots and lots of wealth, and by using that wealth and making this journey to Mecca, he left behind a very important and very impactful legacy, not only to Africa, but clearly to the rest of the world, to the point where this Catalan Atlas, which was made in 1375 by a European map maker, somebody up in the feudal medieval times of Europe. Not necessarily everybody in Europe was concerned with the rest of the world. They didn't trade very much with other regions, but those that were educated and did travel and trade a little bit more, they soon became very aware of this legendary, famous, tale of this incredibly wealthy king, Mansa Musa from Mali. So much so that on their map of the known world, they made a very prominent, large picture of noting who he was and where he was from, showing him as a king with a gold crown holding a giant gold nugget. So this impacted even the kind of isolated and secluded explorers and important people of Europe to the point where they put him on their map. So before we go over to the questions on our slides, I want to point out that this article is here for you to read as well. This will give you a lot more information in order to help you answer questions 3 and 4. So questions 1 and 2 we will do together. All right, so our first question is, how did Mansa Musa make Mali more powerful and wealthy? If you want to look back onto page 5, this will give you a little refresher because it's the same kind of reasons why some of the other kingdoms in the same area also became powerful and wealthy. So our response should be, he took control over major trade cities like Timbuktu and Gao, and he levied a tax on the trade of valuable items like gold and salt. So the gold that is not necessarily, in the mines of Timbuktu, salt that's not necessarily around Timbuktu either, but these two items went through Timbuktu because of their central location in the middle of both of these mines and all these trade routes. It's not that Timbuktu was a city of gold or that gold was naturally, in the ground there, but it's the levying of the taxes on the trade around them that went through Timbuktu is how Mali and King Mansa Musa gets their wealth and their status. Question 2 is, to where did Musa travel on his famous journey? What is this called in the religion of Islam? Well, on the video and the map, it does show and mentioned that he is traveling to Mecca because he is a follower of Islam. He's a Muslim king. And this is one of the pillars of Islam, is to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Do you remember what that's actually called? What the Arabic word is? It is the Hajj. So when he travels across North Africa on his way to the holy city of Mecca, he is completing the pilgrimage of the Hajj. And along the way, he does a lot to both spread and promote Islam, and also does a lot to economically impact the cities and places he's stopping. Because remember, it's taking about a year to travel this massive distance back in these days. Today, you can't, like today, we can just hop onto a plane, take a bus, take a train, and get places, very far away very quickly. Because in the olden times, you had to take an entire entourage of supplies and people with you, it turned into a much longer journey. And during all that time, while you're on this journey, you have the opportunity to meet more people, to stay in more places along the way, and make a big impact in those other cities. So this is where I want you to respond on your own. If you want to rewatch the video clip, you can, but read the New York Times upfront article called The $400 Billion Man and use that extra information that covers his journey and what he does along the way in a lot more detail than what we've talked about so far and in more detail than the TED video covers. Answer these on your own and try to answer with as many specifics as you can. All right, folks, so you have the next couple of days to complete those questions after you read the New York Times upfront article. Make sure that you're checking back here on Classroom for another screencast video where I help you go through pages 7 and 8 as we learn about Ibn Battuta. All right, guys, so there is your schedule for the week. I hope that you guys have a great day, and email me or check back here on Classroom if you need any other information. And I will see you on Wednesday when we cover Ibn Battuta and finish the pages of our packet. All right, have a great day. See you later.